Welcome to Rich Mentality, where I'm going to read the news to you so you don't have to read it yourself. I'm going to try and do this every single Monday because that's generally when one of the best news articles come out, as it pretty much kind of has like a wrap up of the previous week's, you know, just agenda and forecasts and whatnot. So last week's market moves, the Dow Jones was up almost 5%, the S&P also up almost 5%, the Nasdaq was up a little over 5%, and Bitcoin was down just a tad. So all three major US indexes closed up last week with the Nasdaq jumping more than 5%. Overseas, the UK inflation rate rose to a 40-year high, and the British PM Liz Truss announced her intention to resign. Uber launches in-app journey ads as unexpected players build major ad businesses with customer data. Budweiser ad en route to the bar. Your next Uber ride might be sponsored. Last week, the ride hailer announced plans to let marketers target riders based on their destination with journey ads. It's showing ads in the app as part of its new media division, and it's also piloting in car tablets. Think Expedia commercial on the way to JFK. I'm beginning to think I shouldn't say the lines that have the little links in it because I'm not going to be clicking on the link so we don't get the whole punchline. I mean, I don't see how that was a dab moment, but it's been Uber's been doing ads for years, though most have been sponsored listings on Uber Eats. Five-star potential. Uber said its expanded ad biz could hit 1 billion in revenue by 2024. Since ride hail could pull in way more ad revenue than food delivery, Uber says riders will be able to click to buy a product without leaving the app. Cars will become our next living rooms. I actually don't read these prior to the stream, but that was just one of the headlines that I saw where I knew I was going to ramble. Um, so get ready, rambling inbound in probably 10 seconds. Uber's GM of advertising might have missed the work from home memo, but he could be right about growth potential. He said Uber's ad revenue jumped to 141 million last year from 11 million in 2020. Wow, that's a lot. Um, so here comes the rambling. Cars will become our next living rooms. So this is something I've been annoying a lot of people that lend me their ear is the future of autonomous robo taxi networks. Now, I believe it's going to be something that happens by 2030, but essentially, Tesla, Elon Musk, the vehicles that can drive themselves, that whether they end up working with Uber or not, I could see one of those things where it could put even companies like Uber out of business. So essentially, if Tesla integrates it into their Tesla app or an Uber like app, then why would well, I mean, obviously there's going to be a period where a lot of people are uncomfortable with cars driving them rather than having a person drive them. But arguably, the exact opposite spectrum of that perspective is a lot of people don't like getting in cars with strangers. So they rather get in a car where they could either have complete privacy to themselves solo or whoever they're with, their company. So you can debate either side of that spectrum, that argument. But essentially, I think by 2030 we'll have the autonomous robo taxi network, and that's where this headliner just caught my eye. Cars will become our next living rooms. Now they're essentially saying it because apparently, I guess you're sitting on the couch at home flipping through your phone and, you're buying things through ads. And I guess they're saying that's what this is. I took it to a whole nother level. I mean, if you're going to be spending a lot more time not owning a car, but traveling in cars that drive themselves, because it's going to be pennies on the dollar difference than having to pay somebody's like hourly wage. I think one of the things that I don't think Elon said it, but it was kind of like a just a mock up from like what his beliefs are, what he hopefully hopes to get out of EVs and robo taxi networks is it could be something insanely cheap as like uh, I don't remember what it was, so don't quote me on it. So let's just say like a fraction of a penny to travel per mile once this whole entire ecosystem is online. But to be even more specific, the article that I read on that was it wasn't um it wouldn't be like a sedan where you get that good of a price per mile. He was talking about eventually combining like the boring company and the tunnels, and let's say like a van that can seat, I don't know, 25 plus people. So now you're looking at, um, let's say a boring tunnel from Miami to Orlando. So what originally would be, a family that could just barely afford, say, the tickets to go to something in Orlando. Orlando has everything: SeaWorld, Legoland, Disney World, Universal Studios, all the good stuff, right? But so a family only has just enough money to get tickets to go for maybe like uh, 2 days or something. Well, the mock-up was like, okay, well, now a family can afford to take their entire their entire family for like, let's say, $10 in a EV van from Miami to Orlando, have an entire day there, be able to come all the way back. So round trip $10, all in one day, and not have to spend all the extra money on like a hotel or something along those lines. Renting a car and then gas in a car, all that good stuff. So his like meta philosophy is to eventually, you know, cut costs for everyone, like not just, in the States, but in the world. I mean, uh, a, a van that can transport 25 people and on average split up between all the people, it's a tenth of a penny per mile to travel. Anyways, I always thought that was really neat. Um, but that was the whole thing behind cars will become our next living rooms. Sorry for the ramble. Faster ETA. In August, Lyft launched its advertising unit, Lyft Media, adding tablets that riders can interact with to some cars. I mean, I actually think that's really neat. Have you ever been to the restaurants where this sounds terrible saying it. In my head, it sounded like it was going to sound good, but now it's just going to be awful. Is the basically little devices that if you go out to eat, you basically have a chance for even less interaction with your waitress or waiter, where you can essentially just order everything from the little tablet menu, also tip them and purchase the meal, or finish up with your bill, and then just leave without really much interaction. Um, I don't know why I thought of that, but it's at least maybe you would have some interaction once the Robo Taxi network goes live, is you would have a tablet there because you're not going to have a driver to talk to. The capitalist take on if there's a will, there's a way. When it comes to digital marketing dollars, the focus has always been on ad reliant tech titans like Meta, Google, Twitter, and Snap. Oh, look at that. Snap's part of the big team now. Now we're seeing retailers building major ad businesses. Kroger was one of the first retailers to expand its ad biz beyond its own properties, letting brands use its shoppers' data to target them on third party sites. Well, that's not good. Amazon raked in 31 billion in ad revenue last year, giving it a bigger ad biz than Snap and Microsoft. Wow. It controls 78% of the US retail media ad spend. US ad revenue is expected to surpass a record 300 billion this year, partly thanks to unexpected players jumping in from Dollar General, Dick's, Petco, and Ulta Beauty. Hold on one second. Okay, coming up this week, try putting it in rice. Shares of Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta have plunged this year even more than the broader market as advertisers cut spending and high interest rates depress valuations. Last week, Microsoft cut 1,000 employees, adding to the 44,000 plus tech workers laid off in the US this year. Apple reportedly halted some iPhone 14 Plus production in China as demand cools, while Google's forecast to have its slowest revenue growth in years. That recession's coming. With rates on the rise, analysts aren't expecting stellar results when techies report this week. Some snacks never seem to go out of style. Grocery staples like Coca-Cola, Kraft Heinz, and Campbell's Soup have outperformed the market this year as shoppers keep stocking faves like Kraft Mac, eating the price hikes. This month, snack giant Pepsi raised its annual forecast, betting on continued Cheetos demand through an economic downturn. Consumer goods have historically been resilient during recessions. Still, shoppers are starting to swap name brands for cheaper store brands. We'll see whether that shows when Coke and Kraft report. Stories we're watching. The downturns in the details. At first, things looked okay when big banks reported last week. Revenue rose at JPM. What is that? Uh, JP Morgan and Chase? Wells Fargo and Citi thanks to inflated credit card spending beating forecasts. But the fine print was ugly. Bank profits plunged as trading and deal making activity slowed. Think fewer IPOs. While high interest rates plunged, loan demand, think mortgages, banks expect it to get worse, so they've set aside billions to cover potential losses from loan defaults. Yeah, like Bank of America, their forecast was we're going to be losing basically 175,000 million, oh, sorry, 175,000 jobs per month. Basically all of, well, the first 3 quarters of 2023. The clock's ticking. Millions of Americans will likely lose their health insurance when President Biden rolls back COVID aid policies. Current expiration date is January 11th. When Corona was declared a public health emergency, the government injected billions into resources like free testing and hiring more hospital workers. But with the emergency status set to end early next year, nearly 15 million Americans could lose subsidized programs like Medicaid, which hit record enrollment during the pandemic. With hospitals already facing shortages, treatment could be even harder to get. Last week's highlights. Over half of active exchange traded products that track crypto launched after the bear market set in. In other words, institutional investors and tech juggernauts, think big money, largely haven't bailed on crypto. That's surprising because a lot of brokerages have gone bankrupt. Voyager. Netflix shares popped after it added 2.5 million subs last quarter, its first gain of the year. I guess I shouldn't read those because I read that last week. One of the other things I wanted to talk about, not really related to the title, is um, what a lot of people I don't think are very educated on, e- especially in the States when this directly impacts the USA, is basically how the government works. So many people get caught up in, like, they probably don't even know it's the executive branch, but the presidency. Um, you know, compared to, you know, the Senate and the House, the president, you know, and who we get as a president doesn't really have that much power in comparison, in my opinion. Um, but I just wanted to read this article and talk about just basically how few people follow the Senate and voting for the Senate and things like that. As difficult as it is to look away from the dumpster fire engulfing British politics, the US is holding a hugely consequential election of its own in just 15 days. To get prepped, let's take a high level tour of what's at stake at the federal level. Dems are trying to hang on to the House and Senate. This being a midterm election, the White House is not up for grabs in November, but the Senate and House representatives are, which is what I was just rambling about. Currently, the Democrats control all three. Um, which, Biden, Democrat, that's the White House, and then uh, it's technically half and half. You know what? I'm just going to read this. Um, Here's where things stand now. Republicans need to pick up 5 seats. Uh, did I skip? They currently control all three, which has allowed them to pass major legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act. But recent history shows that the party in power often loses congressional seats in the subsequent election. And that's mainly because, for whatever reason, we're just a constant kind of back and forth society, well, dang, they didn't do a good enough, this election, so let's swap to the next, and then back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. The House. Republicans need to pick up 5 seats on net to gain a majority in the House. That will come down to 31 races identified as toss ups by the nonpartisan Cook Political Report. Democrats have to win 81% of those toss ups in order to retain control. The Senate. The Senate is split 50-50 currently, with VP Kamala Harris giving Democrats the tiebreaker. So essentially, anytime there's a bill in the Senate, and a lot of times this actually does happen, is honestly, as childish as it may seem, is a bill comes to the floor, and literally all 50 Democrats vote no, and then all 50 Democrats vote yes, or vice versa. Then the VP actually gets to be the tiebreaker on that. In this case, it's Kamala Harris. So just one Republican gain on net would allow them to flip the chamber. Polls show a number of contests with razor thin margins. The two tightest are in Nevada and Ohio. So, according to polls, what topics matter to voters? The economy, stupid, in quotes. Democratic political strategist James Carville wrote in 1992, and it still rings true today. In an era of soaring inflation, a buckling stock market, and recessionary warning signs, economic issues overwhelmingly concern Americans. Polls have consistently shown that's giving the GOP an edge. Um, Statistically, or historically speaking, empirical data proves that um, over time, the stock market actually does better with Democrats in office, even though the notion is they do better when the Republicans are in office. But Democrats are hoping that the Supreme Court's overturning of Roe v. Wade will motivate their members to come out to the polls and give them the legislative seats they need to create a law that would protect abortion rights. So, what kind of turnout should we expect? Midterm elections typically see less participation than those held alongside presidential cycles, but if early voting patterns are an indication, turnout will be strong this year. More than 5.5 million people had already cast their ballots as of last Thursday, and some states are reporting that their early voting numbers are at least 50% higher now than in 2018. I thought that was worth the read. I know it's not really rich mentality kind of focused by any means, but figured I'd throw that one out there. Um, and then one thing I forgot to touch on on the last stream was is now a good time to invest? So a lot of people probably know a lot more about the sale of Black Friday that's coming up rather than the sale of a recession. So, just real quick, a recession is a great time to invest because think of it as like a Black Friday sale. You're going to get a lot of things for a lot cheaper, and instead of it being a materialistic liability, whatever it is you're purchasing on sale, it is now an asset. You're you're purchasing an asset at a discount. So when you do that, once we come out of the recession, you'll be looking a lot better than you did going into it and probably throughout it. That's pretty much it. Um, yeah, thank you guys for watching, and until next time.